Hello, everybody, and we are back with another show, What You Think, with me, RJ. That man over there, there's Brad.
I'm Brad.
And we got a lot of things to talk about in terms of sports. And so, first of all, we're going to talk about the college football playoff rankings. First, number one, we got Alabama. 2 is Clemson. 3 is LSU. And 4 is Notre Dame. And the first 2 out of the rankings are Michigan at 5 and Georgia at 6. So, Brad, what do you think about the rankings so far?
Definitely one surprise with the first 2. Alabama, clearly the best team in the nation right now. Tua, well, what can we say? He stays healthy. I believe he'll be Heisman Trophy winner. Clemson, they had a little concern with Trevor Lawrence getting hurt and Kelly Bryant's decision to leave, but Trevor looks solid, even though we'll see how that goes come playoff time. The next 3, I was very surprised that they thought Notre Dame was this high, but as much as I don't like Notre Dame, I got to give them their credit. They a top 15 win in the season against Michigan at the beginning of the year. So, they've proven that they're worthy to be in this spot. Do I think they'll be here come season's end? Absolutely not, but that's just me. LSU, I think that they can be one of those finishing teams. They've got a good defense, solid run game, and when they want to, good quarterback play. Their struggle against Florida and other top competition makes it hard for me to believe they can make noise if they do make it to the playoffs, but we'll just have to wait and see how it finishes out. First 2 out, gotta say, I'm not surprised with Georgia. Jake Fromm is the man among men, and I believe they went out and they'll get into the Final Four. And then I believe Michigan is talented, good defense. They're maybe finally going to show us that maybe great season that we've been hoping since Harbaugh arrived, but I still think they lose to Ohio State at the end of the year, and they fall out of Final Four contention. What about you, buddy?
Well, obviously we know about Bama. There's no need to explain much about them. Clemson, obviously they done pretty well. Obviously with this, the whole fiasco with Kelly Bryant transferring from the football team. So obviously they done pretty well. LSU, I would say they done all right for themselves, even though they lost to Florida, which, as we can tell, is not that great of a SEC team this year. They don't have that great of a team, but so far they've done pretty well with the new quarterback. Basically, that they've been doing all right, but obviously that's going to change come this Saturday when they play Alabama. Notre Dame, they've had a really good team this year. It's probably one of the better teams so far in the Brian Kelly era. But obviously, I think they got to win out to really stay in the playoffs. Obviously, but if they lose at least one game, then their season in the playoffs.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Michigan, so far so good, but they're gonna have a tough time this week because obviously with Penn State and their quarterback Tracy McSorley, you see what he can do. So obviously that's going to be a big test. And then Georgia, really all they got to do is win the big games, and then maybe they might still be in the playoffs even if they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. But first they got to play against UK, which they were pretty decent, I would say. But I just hope my Buckeyes will stay in the race. All they got to do is win out. Beat Michigan, of course. They have a couple teams lose, but UK's been all right.
Fair enough.
Any other comments, Bill?
I think you kind of mentioned Kentucky. We can't lose track of Ohio State and Kentucky, even though Ohio State's defense it's not even really, it's just 11 guys putting pads on, but that's for another day.
You got a point there.
The offense can put points on the board, win out. I think you guys will be one of the Final Four teams standing. Kentucky, it honestly just depends because of Benny Stell's not going, even though ending of last week's game, great drive, great game-winning drive. If Benny Stell isn't going and that defense should start to struggle, this team season falls very quickly. But I'd say my top dark horse that's not top 5 or 6, Ohio State, because of the high-powered offense.
Yeah, make sure you look for your national champs, UCF, for sure.
Who?
UCF.
Who?
UCF.
Is that University of Christian?
Undefeated national champs.
Okay.
University of Central Florida.
Okay.
Don't forget about them.
I thought Alabama was, but.
Then next, we got our next topic. Obviously, with Maryland, they had their coach on paid administrative leave after the death of offensive lineman Jordan McNair. As you may have not known, the coach and AD got reinstated yesterday. So now everybody's basically mad, upset that he was able to keep his job. Really, and now news today, they were different student organizations are going to begin protesting at some point this week, and they also encourage the football players to even come out and join them. So obviously on that topic, I would say that I'm not really mad at the whole Maryland University as a whole, because obviously the coach had somebody die under his watch. So obviously that's really the biggest issue in terms of him being reinstated. But there's also sources that said that if the president, because really the board wanted the coach and AD to be reinstated because they felt like he didn't have as much responsibility in the death of one of their players, which I pretty much disagree on that point. But I really disagree with that whole standpoint of the coach and AD, just mainly on that issue that they had a player die under their watch, and that's their priority as a coach to take care of their players, and also the strength and conditioning coach, the former one, he also promoted abusive behavior, abusive language. So I pretty much disagree on that point on him being reinstated. So.
Kind of like how we've seen with other coaching stuff or occasions that have gone on throughout this year alone. I mean, obviously coaches can't keep track of everything that happens, but I mean, when you have these young men signing on to play football for you, obviously they're your responsibility. It's your household, and I don't understand how these two can still be able to be employed at the University of Maryland. I mean, somebody didn't get hurt. It wasn't like something that can be treated or taken care of or something like that. We had a young man actually, unfortunately, pass away, and we send prayers to the family and friends. But I agree with you. I don't know how they still are employed by Maryland, unfortunately. But
we're gonna come back with NFL football. Obviously, as some people may know, or a majority of people may know, the Browns fired their head coach Hugh Jackson and offense coordinator Ty Haley from the team. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's kind of a difficult picture to paint for some people, just because, I mean, obviously when you look at his total record, I believe it was 231-1 or 233-1. Obviously, when you look at the full body of it, you obviously understand why, because that is absolutely horrendous winning percentage, and it's amazing that he lasted 2-3 seasons. But when you look at this year and how they finally have, it looks like something going with Baker Mayfield and new defensive weapons. It finally looks like, even though it's not going great, it looks like they finally had something going. And I think they should have at least, although his record was completely awful, and as an NFL coach you can't allow that, I do believe he should have at least gotten the right to finish out the season, just because this is honestly the first year he's had something real to work with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. I see where you're coming from, but also there was a lot of sources that were saying that obviously the coach and offense coordinator, they weren't seeing eye to eye at all.
Could see that on the field.
Yeah, really from the point that Ty Haley was really hired from the Browns. Him and Hugh Jackson wasn't seeing eye to eye as far as offensive strategy and in terms of developing Baker Mayfield. So really, when you have that kind of disagreement going on top of you're not winning, you're not winning any football games. Obviously the door is going to hit you. You know what I'm saying? So,
that's the end of that story. Hopefully he gets hired again, but again, the end of it all, the Browns are trash.
Was Maryland just fired their coach?
Oh, they just did?
Just fired their coach.
Oh, really?
A producer's update from Gabe Smith back behind the camera.
We appreciate it, Gabe. Well, so now that we know, going back a couple topics, we now know that Maryland's head coach has been fired, and we're waiting to see about AD as well. But I guess this is just meant to happen. I mean, can't allow stuff like this to go down. It'd be different if it was maybe or drug-related. Unfortunately, I wouldn't want to say that we want it to be that kind of situation, but we'd rather it be a personal issue than something like this. So I guess it just had to happen.
Yeah, a lot of pressure from the, board, students, basically just about everybody in University of Maryland wanted him to get fired. So there you have it. He got fired.
Yeah, and shout out to our director, Gabe, back there. Appreciate the update.
Gabe, appreciate breaking news.
I got you, boys.
All right, so we're going to move more of a high note a little bit. So we got winners and losers of the NFL trades that happened. So obviously
There was a lot of trades.
Demaryius Thomas, he got traded to the Texans. We got Golden Tate. He got traded to the Eagles. Clinton Dix. He got traded to the Redskins. Dante Fowler. He got traded to the Rams. Am I missing?
I say we got Demaryius Thomas. Ty Montgomery going to the Ravens from the Packers, which it's kind of ironic, but I'll get to that in a minute.
So who are your winners and losers?
Losers, I definitely have to say my biggest loser of those 5 is definitely the Lions, because the Lions have struggled to an extent already this season, and Matthew Stafford in last week finally looked like he was starting to put a rhythm together, and now you strip him of maybe his best offensive weapon. It doesn't make any sense, but then again, sometimes business in the NFL really doesn't. So, as we've seen over the past couple of years, my definite winner, I'd say it's about even between Dante Fowler Jr. and Demaryius Thomas. Fowler Jr., he joins an already dominant offensive or defensive line with Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald, and that just makes the Rams even more formidable. They're the only undefeated team left, and they're looking to run the table even though they have a tough matchup with the Saints next week. Texans, they just so happen to lose one of their best players in Will Fuller, so I think the timing couldn't be better. You bringing in somebody he's not as fast as Will Fuller is, but he's definitely a better playmaker, and you line him up with DeAndre Hopkins, I think that's going to be a big improvement, and we'll see it starting next week, assuming that they let Demaryius Thomas dress that fast with a new playbook.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on the winner when it comes to Demaryius Thomas going to the Texans, but I think he'll pair up pretty well with DeAndre Hopkins.
There'll be no. They can't double DeAndre anymore.
No, not at all. He's still getting his, even his. Being double.
Might be the best receiver in the league this year.
Yeah, I say losers. I say basically everybody except for the New York Giants, because obviously they need a lot of help.
You don't think the Packers are losers? They lose their best defense.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Everybody except the Giants and more so the Packers, because really they basically haven't
they're wasting Aaron Rodgers away.
Aaron Rodgers out on the limb because they just Jordan Nelson. Now they traded Ty Montgomery. And
he might have had that coming after that fumble at the end of the Rams game.
Yeah, so they basically have him out on the limb. Basically, he might be doing it by himself for a little bit more longer. But honestly, I think the Giants, they need a lot more help. Basically, everybody in their division pretty much upgraded to, especially with the Cowboys, because they added number 1 receiver Amari Cooper, and Clinton Dix, the Redskins, going to take to the Eagles. So basically, everybody in that division basically upgraded, except for the Giants, and they need a lot more help than all 3 of those teams, and they didn't do anything.
I agree.
To help out, so
I agree.
That's why I think so. So on to the NBA. Obviously, Tyronn Lue, he got fired. After their 0-6 start. But obviously, after he got fired, they've won their past 2 games. So, what I think about the whole situation, obviously, him and Kobe Altman, they weren't seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. It really, the Cavs, that whole thing was kind of dysfunctional from the jump. Because obviously you lost LeBron. It was of course you had high hopes because you signed Kevin Love and you drafted Colin Sexton. But now not Colin Sexton. Kevin Love, obviously he's injured. He's injured with a bruised toe, so he's going to be out for a while. Colin Sexton, they've been That's been
shuffling.
one of the few. That's been one of the few issues with the Cavs as far as player development, because Kobe Altman what he wanted to do was really put all the veterans in the rotation, such as J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver. But Kobe Altman, what he wanted to do was he wanted to put the younger players in rotation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, basically for player development. So they wanted Kyle Korver and J.R. Smith out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, out of the rotation. But one game, Tyronn Lue, he basically, you know, threw that whole scheme, that whole strategy away, and because one game they were out of the rotation, and the next game he put them right back in the rotation. So I think really, obviously, when you have issues with GM, obviously, you know, NBA business usually.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, you know, when you have a rough, you know,
Mm-hmm.
rough relationship with GM, of course, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's almost imminent apparent that, you know, you might get fired, and especially after, you know, they start 0-6,
Mm-hmm.
bam, he got fired. So
I agree with the majority of the points you put out there. I mean, obviously, Kobe Altman knows his basketball. That's why he was brought into the position. And LeBron, even himself, before his departure, was a big fan of bringing him in. Obviously, I mean, Tyronn Lue, they can't deny that even though they did have LeBron, they did achieve success. They brought the Cavaliers' first title ever to the city. And, of course, you got to give him his respect for what happened in the past. But I think at times like this, some young coaches get a little too ahead of themselves, even though I believe he had one of the best winning percentages during that period of all time. You got to be willing to put it behind.
You know why?
Yeah, because of King. I'll say it just once, because of King James. But yeah, no problem. Tyronn Lue should be thanking, but that's a different story. So I mean, obviously, it all started in the summer when you lost LeBron. Because anytime you lose someone, or like a top-tier player is one thing, but you lose the best player on the planet. I mean, obviously, that's going to create shockwaves already throughout the organization. And Kobe Altman was believing, okay, that we lost LeBron, but it's just time to hit the reset button. And I understand where he's coming from. I mean, you draft Colin Sexton, who I believe has a very high ceiling, can be one of the more talented players in the draft. You sign Kevin Love, who can really kind of show him the ropes and will still be a solid player for the next 4 or 5 years throughout his contract. But then Tyronn Lue wants to shuffle that because he thinks he can. Maybe he was trying to prove a point. No one knows. But at the end of the day, because Altman was just, I believe in the overall scheme of things, Altman was just trying to really get this franchise ready to reset and go for the next couple of years to come. Because I mean, Colin Sexton is a part of the future, and maybe some other players. J.R. Smith is not. Kevin Love will be for a couple of years, but then some of these other players just aren't it. And I get what he was trying to do, and I believe Tyronn Lue was the one in the wrong, just because all he had to do was just follow GM. I mean, because if LeBron leaves, they struggle, but they're still developing this future talent. I think Tyronn Lue still has a job, but it's because he went against the future plan that he's no longer sitting in the coach's office. But I don't think they're going to miss. I mean, they're promoting a new interim head coach, and they'll go forward from here. But we can only see.
Yeah. So with Tyronn Lue getting fired, so who do you think is on the hot seat right now as far as head coaches in the NBA?
Head coaches in the NBA, I'd have to say my top two. Easily, Scott Brooks for the Wizards might be up there right now, just because, I mean, they don't have a top tier player they don't have Giannis, they don't have Kawhi, or KD. I mean, but they do have John Wall, who's an elite point guard in this game. Bradley Beal, elite scorer in this game. Dwight Howard, yet to play, but an elite player. They have pieces, but it seems like it's the same thing every year with the Wizards. They play down to competition, which costs them games. And they just continually self-destruct from the inside. Like recent reports that from like Bradley Beal and others that players are so worried about their touches, their game, that they'd rather see themselves shine. And they're trying to, hero ball. I mean, we've all seen it before. And it's just ripping the team. And honestly, even though I think that the star player, John Wall, should be held accountable for some of this locker room issue, Scott Brooks has to be able to get in there and do something about it, because this team is way too talented to be sitting where they're sitting. And as far as my second one, It's not super hot seat, but I think Mike D'Antoni's name should be eventually, if this pace continues to the Rockets, should be considered. Because, I mean, we've seen what happened with Chris Paul. Then Chris Paul has to go. They struggle without Chris Paul. Now James Harden is hurt, and they're still struggling. And as you know, the Mike D'Antoni's offense, it only works with certain pieces in it. If Chris Paul's not there, or James Harden aren't there to run it, then, and I get they're trying, Melo's using this opportunity to try and show that he could still go, but that's not working either. Like I kind of thought from the beginning, Melo is not what he used to be. Melo's a good, maybe 10 to 15 a night. He's not meant for this starting role anymore. But if this pace continues, I say Mike D'Antoni should be on the hot seat. But of course, when Chris Paul and James Harden are both together again, I think it'll get back on track. But until then, I think we need to watch Mike D'Antoni.
Interesting take there.
Thanks.
But I think obviously I think one coach that might be on hot seat for me personally is not Scott Brooks, Bill Donovan for Thunder, because obviously I think that he's done okay. He's done okay as far as trying to really develop players in a way, kind of sort of. But I think that he hasn't been able to really bring the Thunder to the level they're supposed to be, especially with you re-sign Paul George. You can still keep Russell Westbrook, and yet we still, struggling with the same things. Defensive legs in probably third quarter, shooting the ball, poorly, game by game. Not really game by game, but one game we might shoot well, but for the next 2-3 games we might shoot terrible. So I think that I think he's somewhere on the hot seat, and also being outside probably first round of the playoffs. So I think he's sitting on the hot seat for now.
You don't think? But obviously, I agree with what you're saying. Just because, even though they did lose Kevin Durant, which is a big loss, or going on 3 years ago, you don't think any of the ownership should fall in Russell Westbrook's hands? Because Billy Donovan, even though he might be the coach, this is Russ's franchise now.
Some of it does,
and he controls the ball
only because of the way he plays. Because he goes so hard that he goes so hard that he does things to himself, like obviously shooting threes when he shouldn't be shooting threes, creating turnovers, all that that kind of stuff. So, but I think you have to live with it. As far as liking Russell Westbrook, because he's been playing like this, so he's able to pull up numbers. It's just that his weaknesses, playing so hard,
playmaking, 3-point shot.
Yeah, so his playmaking, some of his decision making is a little questionable at times. Turn the ball over, because for past 2 seasons he's been top 2, I think.
With him and James Harden.
Yeah, as far as turnovers per game. So obviously you have to live with that, but I think that Billy Donovan, he's not been able to take Thunder as far as they should be. So
I agree. We can only see how the season progresses. It's only been 10 games. We'll see soon.
And speaking of Russell Westbrook, yesterday against the Clippers, he had a little beef with Patrick Beverley, that's obviously been going on for some years now. Obviously, he dove for the Patrick Beverley. He dove for the ball. Obviously, he towards the knee level area, and Russell Westbrook took exception to that. And then Billy Donovan tried to call timeout to defuse the situation, but in the footage you can see him still towards still walking towards the Clippers bench, and talking trash to Patrick Beverley, which aimed at them with double technicals. So, what's your thing?
I know I remember when it all started. I believe it was back when Patrick Beverley was with the Rockets, when they met in the first round a couple years ago. Same kind of situation. Russ goes for a loose ball because that's the kind of player he is. He plays hard all the time. And Patrick Beverley dives at his knees. Similar situation. That time it ended up with Russ, I believe, tearing a meniscus or some kind it required knee surgery. And unfortunately, it forced Russ to miss a series, and it cost them a deep playoff run that year. I mean, I'm in support completely of Russ here just because it's repeated proof over and over. Patrick Beverley has tried to make moves towards Russ's knees because, he's such an explosive and hard or 100-mile-per-hour player that Russ sometimes isn't paying attention to what he's doing. And Patrick Beverley has tried to take advantage of it multiple times going after his legs. And I wouldn't be surprised. I think Patrick Beverley gets a fine, maybe a suspension or something for this, because this isn't new. This is repeated offense that, although I think Russell Westbrook shouldn't be talking back, Patrick Beverley's tried this multiple times, and I think the league finally needs to do something about it before Russ ends up getting hurt again because of Patrick Beverley.
Well, okay. Well, I'll give Patrick Beverley a benefit of the doubt because I've seen the video. And it looked like he was trying to go for the ball because he did lose the ball a little bit on the dribble. But obviously, when you go for the knee, and it has happened before, where you had to have surgery on your knee because of a similar play.
I understand.
Obviously, Russell Westbrook, he's going to take exception to that.
I believe, yeah. I get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
obviously, they've been going at it,
For a couple years.
For a few years, so. It's just usual trash talk. Just use trash talk.
I get what you're saying because Patrick Beverley, I think, is of that same ilk like Russ. I mean, both of them have that dog in them. They don't like to lose, and if you try and get in their way, you're an enemy. But I mean, I get what you mean. I saw the play, but it's the only reason I believe that Patrick's more guilty is because it's a repeated offense towards the same player, and Russ has been injured in the past because of it. So that's why I'd say I'm more with Russ because it's a repeated offense.
That's all right because we won the game. And then Russell Westbrook dropped 32 on his head, like he said.
Hey.
That's a baby down there. That's a baby down there. So there you have it. That's all the topics we got for you. I'm RJ. That's Brad. And thanks for watching What You Think. See you next time.